This is the new Li-Ning Turbocharging 75B. And this racket replaces the N92 series. So you might be wondering, why the new name change? Why do the graphics look so similar to the N92? Well, Li-Ning has decided to change their naming system on all their rackets. And for the Turbocharging N9 series, they have decided to go away with the N naming structure and just stick to the basically name. So every racket's going to have a name now. And the N9 series has traditionally been called Turbocharging. So they're going to keep the Turbocharging and now add a letter at the end. I don't know what the 75 stands for, but there it is. Under this new naming structure, there are now 3 submodels within each of these naming models. So there's no longer just N92, and that's it. It is now the Turbocharging 75, and there is a B model, an I model, and a D model, all with different characteristics and colors. So for the Turbocharging 75 series, there's this black and purple-y blue with accents, and then there is a black with the green accents, and then there is a black with what I believe is sort of a brownish gold accent. Now, it's not as simple as just weights change, but also the balance point changes as well, depending on which model that you purchase. So it's almost like a totally new racket on its own. But what doesn't change is the head shape and the material construction of the racket. But between the 3 models, they are very different rackets indeed, and they have different balance points and weights. So for this version is the B model. It is the matte black with the purple and blue accents. And just going through with it now, you can see that there's a lot of turbocharging naming. And then on the right side, the dynamic optimum frame, ultra carbon, all these fancy type of technical terms that's supposed to mean something. I have to say, this is a very handsome looking racket. The blue accent and the purple really look very good, as it stands out quite a bit on that matte black. And overall, it really goes well with how I like to sort of string and grip my rackets, because I like using black strings. So yeah, I'd say it's a very, very handsome racket. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit with how this plays as well, and I'm going to go on a little bit about the naming structure. So with this new naming structure, you'll no longer see the N, and I think Li-Ning has decided that for the entire range. So even the N94 hasn't been out for very long, just like the N92 has not been out for very long. But even the N94 is now changed into the 3D Calibre. So people that might be a little bit more acute to this, if you have been keeping up with the Li-Ning rackets, you'll notice that the 3D Calibre model and the outgoing N94, there is a colorway and that looks exactly the same. So like the Turbocharging series, there are 3 submodels within the 3D Calibre model, and one of those models is basically identical in color and look to the N94. So likewise with the Turbocharging 75, the B model, which I have here, looks the same as the outgoing N92. From what I understand, this outgoing model, the N92 outgoing model, feels the same as the 75B, and then the I, which stands for Instinct, is a much lighter version of this racket. weighing I think around 75 to 79 grams, whereas the other rackets are all above 80, so I think 82 to 86. The D model is a stiffer version of this racket. So it's going to be a little bit slower and less flexible, but it's supposed to give you even more power. Now, why Li-Ning has gone with this new naming structure, I'm not too sure. What seems to be happening is that they're taking a page from Victor, because Victor allows you to have different 3U, 2U, or 4U across all their high-end model lineups. So one racket, say the Brave Sword, for example, will actually have 3 variants. A 2U, 3U, or sometimes it'll be 3U, 4U, 5U, sometimes it'll be 2U, 3U, 4U. But they're all under the Brave Sword naming. So I think Li-Ning had decided to go with that. They dropped the N, and now they're just going to stick with the naming. So how does this actually play? I haven't played with an N92 before, so I was quite curious to see how this played, because I really wanted to try an N92. I've had quite a bit of requests on how an N92 plays after I did my N9 review. And this racket is a little bit stiffer than an N9, and it's a little bit stiffer, but it feels actually a little bit lighter. So I'm not sure. I think the bounce point's a little bit closer towards the grip than the N9, the first version, but it is definitely stiffer. So it sort of retains that speed of the N9, but has a little bit more power than the N9. So it doesn't really whip as hard or as quickly as an N9, but it has more of a stiffer shaft, so it really connects with the bird quite well, and it smashes quite well. It's also a very consistent racket. It plays very well at the net and also in the backcourt. It never seems to really, keep you guessing, or your shot doesn't really become inconsistent. It's also a very easy racket to get used to if you're playing at this level. This is definitely not a beginner's racket. None of the Li-Ning top-of-the-line rackets are beginner's rackets. These are going to be more for your intermediate to advanced player. And for me, it's going to sound a bit strange, but a lot of players actually say the same, so it sort of confirms my feeling, but all brands sort of have a certain feeling. It's sort of intangible, and it sounds cliche, but it took me a long time to get used to that Victor Hyper Nano that it had, and when I got used to it, it's a great racket, but it took, months. But coming back to this racket, it was quite natural, and I don't know if that's just because I've been using predominantly Li-Ning rackets, but for sure it feels like a Li-Ning racket because it is a Li-Ning racket, and it sort of has that same characteristic as a lot of the Li-Ning rackets have. So it's quite a good combination, right? I mean, the N9 was a very, very successful racket. They stiffened it up ever so slightly, but I think they altered the bounce point also ever so slightly to try to retain that speed and that feel to it while having slightly harder hitting power, because the N9 does lack a little bit of hitting power compared to some of the stiffer rackets out there. Having said that, if you're an advanced player, any racket will almost work for you, and a racket will have less of an impact on your play. But for some newer players that have been playing with a specific brand or type of feel, changing a racket might be difficult. So if you've been playing sort of with an N9 or an N9 type of racket, going to this Turbocharging 75 will feel quite good. It shouldn't take too much time to get used to. It feels sort of like a lighter version of a Yonex Arc 11. I haven't played a lot with Yonex rackets. In fact, the only one I've ever played with is an Arc Saber 11. And I have to really say that has a really great feel to it, that racket. And I can see why it's super popular in the doubles game, and why so many people love that racket and swear by that racket. This racket feels somewhat similar, except a little bit lighter, but in balance, and the way the weight is distributed feels sort of similar. I noticed that on the website, This B version is the cheapest. I'm not too sure why. I think the D version is the most expensive, and the I version, the Instinct version, is between the two. So the I version is the lighter version. I guess that would be like the 4U version. Li-Ning does not use that weight structure as the other brands do. And the D version would be, I guess, a 2U type of version, or a 3U but stiffer head heavy version. This is more like the all-arounder, this one right here that I have. And yeah, that is my review of the Turbocharging 75. Li-Ning has changed the name structure. It's quite confusing. Don't quite like how they're doing that, but over time we will all get used to it. It's a very pretty looking racket. I don't know about you, but for me, I love matte black, and having these accents are quite cool. Overall, there's nothing that really stands out about this racket that I love. I just think it's a really good overall racket to use. It's easy to use, and so far it hasn't really done anything weird or strange for me to not like it. I think I still prefer an N9, the first model, but that racket is going to be taking off market soon, so I might grab another one of these and use this as a backup. But overall, I think this is quite a good racket if you're looking for an all-rounder type of racket that will sort of serve a good purpose all around. You can definitely use this as singles or doubles. I no longer believe that rackets are made particularly for one style of play. Rackets are just rackets now. Whatever works for you works for you. There's no such thing as a singles racket or a doubles racket. Whatever works for you works. So don't really listen to people saying, oh, this is a singles racket, you shouldn't use it for doubles, or this is a doubles racket, it's too light for singles. I don't believe in any of that. Whatever works for you works for you. So that is the Turbocharging 75B model. Please look on the Li-Ning websites to further understand their new naming structure, and hope this has helped you. Thanks a lot.